Hello everyone. This is the second part of the lecture video on the classical model. In this lecture video, we shall be discussing about the monetary theory in the classical model, the quantity theory of money, the determination of the output, employment, wage rates and the price level. And finally, we shall move on to the determination of aggregate demand. Quantity theory of money is one of the two most important pillars on which the classical model rests. The other is the Say's law, which we shall be discussing later on. In the classical theory, the quantity of money determines the price level and it gives us the idea about aggregate demand. The basic classical idea that gives us some information about the quantity of money and the determination of price level is through the quantity theory of money. The quantity theory asserts that the money determines only the price level and not the real output. The basic idea of the quantity theory is that all the individuals are rational, therefore they will not be interested in holding idle money balances, because money produces nothing and it yields no satisfaction. Rather, the rational individual will instantaneously use all the cash that they receive from selling goods and services in order to buy other goods and services. Now, how promptly that occurs, that will be depending on how production is organized in the economy, how frequently the incomes are paid to the factors of production, and it will depend on other structural and institutional factors, so that are independent of the quantity of money or the level of prices. With all these assumptions at the back of our mind, we can now show how the quantity theory of money shows that the quantity of money determines the level of the nominal prices. The quantity of money will have no impact on the demand or supply of any individual product. Therefore, its impact on relative prices or the absolute quantities of products produced and sold will be absolutely zero. Therefore, quantity of money will have no impact on the aggregate production also. There are different ways of stating the quantity theory of money. In this lecture, we shall be talking about two closely related formulations of the theory. One is the quantity theory of money in the transactions form, and the other is the quantity theory of money in the income form. The equation of exchange as it is described here was introduced by Irving Fisher. The transactions form of the quantity theory of money is described as MV is equal to PT into T. Now describe the individual components that form this particular transactions form of the equation of exchange. M is defined as the quantity of money in circulation. V is defined as the velocity of money in circulation. So this is the average number of times per year that units of money are used in any purchase sales transaction. PT is the average price level at which all the transactions occur, and T is the physical volume of total money using transactions. Now, M is measured as the total number of monetary units in private circulation. In the classical model, M is taken to include only cash plus bank deposits that are subject to check. In the classical model, the cash holding by the banks and the governments are not included. Therefore, all the cash and deposits are owned by some business or individuals or private entities. Therefore, M is the sum of all the individual balances of cash and deposit held at any given time. Let us consider the right hand side first. PT is some price index that reflects changes in the average of prices at which the transactions occurs. So, PT is appropriately weighted also. and T gives us the physical volume of total money using transactions. Therefore, the right hand side PT into T gives us the money value of all the transactions that are taking place in the economy. On the left hand side, we multiply M with V. M is, as described earlier, the quantity of money in circulation, and V is the velocity of money in circulation, that is the average number of times per year that units of money are used in any purchase sale transaction. Therefore, M into V will be giving us the quantity of money that will be required to facilitate the given transactions in the economy. So, ideally, MV should be always equal to PT into T. Let us now consider how in this version of quantity theory of money, any change in quantity of money in circulation will have an impact on the price level. In this model, V is assumed to be depending on some institutional factors. So, it will depend on payment habits of the individual and many other similar factors. Therefore, this V may be treated as constant. In fact, as pointed out by the classicals, V is always constant at its maximum feasible level because no rational individual will ever hold an idle balance of money. So, he or she will be holding money for only a period over which the money is used to purchase any kind of goods and services. If we assume that prices are perfectly flexible as it is indeed in the classical model, then T, the total volume of physical volume of transactions, can always be at the maximum level permitted by the technology and the willingness to work of the community. So, therefore, with V and T constant, there exists a proportional relationship between M and PT. So, as the quantity of money in circulation changes, then that will be having a direct impact on the price level in the economy. However, there were certain problems associated with this transactions form of quantity theory of money. There exists no acceptable measurement of physical volume of transactions and the prices of total volume of transactions. Moreover, this transaction variable T will include not only sales and purchases of newly produced goods, but also exchanges of previously produced goods and financial assets. So, that makes the measurement of T much more difficult. So, for that we move on to another version of the quantity theory of money, which is the income form. The income form of quantity theory of money or the income form of equation of exchange emphasizes only on the income transactions. The equation of exchange is written as MV is equal to P times Y. M is the quantity of money in circulation once again. V is velocity of money in circulation, but this time it is the average number of times per year that units of money are used for purchase and sale of final products only, so that we do not consider the units of money that are used for purchase and sale of any kind of transaction. Y is the real national product expressed per year or any kind of time frame. P is the national product deflator. So, PY is the money value of the national product. The left hand side MV actually measures the same thing but using money. Once again, V, which is the income velocity of money, is fixed by payment habits and the other institutional factors. In the short run, V thus may be treated as a constant. In the classical model, output is fixed at the full employment level. Therefore, once again, we get a direct and proportional relationship between the quantity of money circulation and price level. The income form of quantity theory of money is much more acceptable than the earlier version. Here, Y may be easily identified as real GNP and hence it can be easily measured. P is taken as the GNP deflator and therefore it is also measurable. We can have ready data on this GNP deflator. The equation of exchange, however, is a truism and it doesn't explain the variables that it contains. One thing that we should keep in mind that Fisher and other quantity theorists, however, postulated that the equilibrium values of the elements in the equation of exchange can be determined by other forces. Output is supply determined in the classical model. Money supply is exogenously determined by the monetary authority and V is determined by the institutional factors and it is fixed in the short run. Using the equation of exchange, thus Fisher and other quantity theorists tried to find out the impact of changes in money supply on the price level. The equations of exchange are fairly easy to understand. However, the economic intuition behind these equations of exchange is not quite clear. What are the channels through which the changes in money supply would affect the price levels? These questions were answered later on by a reformulation of the quantity theory of money, which is called the Cambridge approach. The earlier versions of quantity theory of money used the concept of velocity of money in circulation. This theory was reformulated using a different terminology to explain the relationship between money supply and the price level using economic intuition. Alfred Marshall and A.C. Pigou were among the proponents of this Cambridge approach of quantity theory of money. Since they were associated with Cambridge University, then this version of quantity theory of money was named after that famous university. This version of quantity theory of money also found out a proportional relationship between aggregate price level and the quantity of money. However, their approach was less mechanical than the transaction form of the quantity theory of money. The Cambridge version starts from the optimal level of money holding by the individuals. Marshall pointed out that people will hold some money because of the convenience that it provides in transactions than the other stores of value. It helps in reducing the risk of bankruptcy while meeting unexpected obligations, so the money offers some security against unforeseen contingencies. Pigou, however, pointed out that liquid cash holding generates no income. So money bears no interest. Therefore, people will hold money if the benefit from holding money in terms of security and convenience is more than, firstly, the income lost by not investing it elsewhere, and or secondly, the satisfaction lost by not using it to purchase goods. The Cambridge equation states that demand for money MD is proportional to the nominal income. Hence, the Cambridge equation is written as MD equal to K times PY. Money is desired for its usefulness in transaction. Hence, MD should depend on the level of transactions, which in turn is closely related to the nominal income. In this version, K is the proportion of money demanded to nominal income. This K will depend on the payment habits of the people and other similar factors. Therefore, in the short run, K may be treated as a stable factor. Y is fixed at the full employment level. In equilibrium, exogenously given money supply, MS should be equal to MD. Therefore, we get the equation to be MS equal to MD equal to K times P times Y bar, where Y bar is fixed at full employment level. So it states that all the money that exists would be in someone's balance, and in equilibrium it must be willingly held. The Cambridge equation is equivalent to the Fisherian equation of exchange when we take V to be equal to 1 by K. So therefore, if K is given, then we can find out V and vice versa. Now, although there is an equivalence between the two theories, the Cambridge version is always better because the Cambridge version is a step more towards modern monetary theory. In fact, in the Cambridge version, the quantity theory of money is treated as a theory of demand for money. Given the stability of K in short run and with output fixed at the full employment level, there would exist a proportional relationship between money supply and price level. Now, as mentioned earlier, the Cambridge version of quantity theory of money explains this proportional relationship. This was not there in the earlier versions of equation of exchange. Let us start from an initial equilibrium condition and we assume that the equilibrium money supply increases. Therefore, given the demand for money, there would be an excess supply of money. In the classical model, money has no value of its own. Therefore, people are rational enough to get rid of this excess money. So, this excess money will be put in some other uses, for example, in consumption and investment. Therefore, people will spend this additional money to purchase more goods and services. However, output is fixed at the full employment level. Therefore, price level will rise. As price level rises, the nominal income will rise and money demand will ultimately rise, so that this excess supply in the money market will ultimately be cleared. So this is how in the classical model an increase in money supply will lead to some upward pressure on the price level. However, as pointed out by the classical economists, there are certain exceptions to the quantity theory of money. In the model, we can find out two such cases where the quantity theory of money may not hold. In the first case, there may be possibility of hoarding or dishoarding if there is uncertainty about the future developments in the economy. Suppose that the individuals are very uncertain about or very apprehensive about the future political developments in the economy. Now we assume that with such apprehension, people increase their desired money holding, say by 10%. This is done to meet the unforeseen contingencies and liabilities. In this case, there is no change in the money supply. However, as the desired money holding rises by 10%, spending on output will reduce by 10% and the real output may be sold only at a price which is 10% lower than before. Since prices are flexible, then all the prices in the economy would fall by 10%. So that nominal income will fall by 10%, but it would be buying the same quantity of goods as before. 10% of money has been put in idle balances, so as if it has just disappeared from the market. Now later on, this anticipation or the expectation may be revised upward so that people may dishoard in the same fashion. However, although this is a possibility, then the classical economists tried to save the theory by saying that this type of hoarding or dishoarding will not arise in the normal situations. So that in this exceptional case, the quantity theory of money may not hold true, but of course, this is a very rare phenomenon. Now we consider the second case, which may be more serious, where wages and prices may be temporarily rigid, especially in the downward direction. This may be true in very short run or even in short run. Now suppose that there is a fall in the money supply because of the tight monetary policy of the government. Then that would lead to a fall in the nominal income. but the prices are rigid downward. So therefore it would be Y rather than P which would decline in response to such change. Therefore in the short run, output may fall below the full employment level. Once again, as pointed out by the classical theorists, this phenomenon is only a temporary or a short-term phenomenon. Therefore, in the long run, the quantity theory of money will be holding true because the wages and prices will be perfectly flexible in the long run. Now we consider how wages, prices, output and employment are determined in the classical model. We consider a 4-part diagram. In part A, we show labor supply and labor demand as functions of real wage rate. In part B, we show the production function. In part C, we show the quantity theory of money, where on the vertical axis we show PY and on the horizontal axis we show M, the supply of money. Finally, in part D, we show the relationship between money wage rate and the prices. To start with, we know the exogenously given money supply M0. In the labor market, NS and ND will cut each other at point T. Therefore, we get equilibrium real wage rate to be W by P0 and the full employment level of labor as NF. From part B, we can get the full employment level of output YF corresponding to the level of employment NF. Now we come to part C. Given M0, we can find out PY0. As we know Y0 as YF, so therefore we can find out P0. From the part D of the diagram, as we know P0, then we can find out W0. This W by P0 line, the slope of this line will be given by the real wage rate that was determined in the labor market, which is obtained from part A of the diagram. So in this fashion, output, employment, real wage rate, prices, money wage rate can be determined in the classical model. Finally, we come to the determination of the aggregate demand curve in the classical model. The aggregate demand curve shows the relationship between the prices and the output demanded in an economy. The quantity theory is the implicit theory of aggregate demand for output within the classical system. We can use the Cambridge version of the quantity theory to construct the classical aggregate demand. The Cambridge version is, as we have just seen, can be written as M is equal to K times Py. Let us now fix some particular value of money supply. Let it be M0. So given this M0 and given K, we get the equation as Py is equal to a constant. So this gives us the aggregate demand curve in the classical model, which shows the relationship between P and Y as Py is equal to a constant. Therefore, on the price income plane, this aggregate demand curve can be drawn as a rectangular hyperbola. Each aggregate demand curve is drawn on the basis of a given money supply. An increase in money supply will shift the aggregate demand curve to the right. This is because when the money supply increases, then P times Y will also increase. So that is why the aggregate demand curve will be shifting towards right. The fact that the aggregate demand curve changes only when the supply of money changes will give us some idea about why it is said that the classical theory of aggregate demand is actually an implicit theory. It does not focus on the individual components of aggregate demand. In fact, it uses the components from the money market only. If money supply increases, then there will be an excess supply of money and there will be a spillover from the money market to the commodity market. As pointed out earlier, that individuals will try to get rid of their excess supply of money, so they will increase their demand for goods and services produced in the economy. So this theory of aggregate demand is basically coming from the quantity theory of money, or it is coming basically from the money market. So that is why it's an implicit theory. Now we consider the equilibrium in the economy. So we put the vertical aggregate supply curve and the downward sloping aggregate demand curve in one diagram. This aggregate demand curve AD is drawn on the basis of a given money supply, which is MS0. AS0 is the initial aggregate supply curve. So the price is P0 and the output is YF, which is the full employment level of output. Now suppose the supply of money increases, which shifts the aggregate demand curve to the right. Now given A is 0, the price level rises to P1, but output level is remaining unchanged at YF. So this gives us a very important result in the classical model. In the classical model, the aggregate demand has no role to play in determination of output and employment. As long as the supply side is remaining unchanged, there will be no impact on the real variables such as output and employment. If there is some supply side impetus which shifts the aggregate supply curve from AS0 to AS1, then and then only we can have some impact on the level of output. So in the classical model, money is essentially neutral. Any change in money supply will have its impact only on the prices. There will be no impact on the real variables such as output and employment. So there is a dichotomy between the factors determining the real and the nominal variables in the classical system. So in the classical theory, the real factors or the supply side factors will be determining the real variables. Output, employment will be depending basically on the supply side factors, whereas the money will be having impact only on the prices, on the nominal variables. So that gives us some very important results in the classical model. Now in the other lecture videos that will be coming soon, we shall be discussing about the determination of interest rate in the classical model, which will be giving us some other very important results of the classical model. And after that we shall be going for the policy prescriptions in the classical model. So till then, bye and have a good day.